All right, everybody. We would like to welcome everybody to our fourth of a six series of the multi-generational families eating well. And we are just happy to be able to be here and be able to share with you a little bit more about nutrition health, as well as today we're going to be talking a little bit about fitness and how to understand a little bit more about dietary supplements. So this is again the fourth lesson. So last week we had a little bit more on the savory foods, like how to be able to flavor things without salt. So a little bit of herbs and spices, as well as how to reduce a little bit of salt in our diet. And we do have 3 weeks previously. And so if you have missed any of those, feel free and follow the links below to be able to see these over in our YouTube channel. And again, this is a grant funding being taught by a dietitian. So we are happy to be able to continue to provide these as a free service so that people can have easy access to nutrition and recommendations. So either below or here at the QR code, you're able to click on this, and this will be the pre-assessment. If this is your first week starting, we would encourage starting in the first week and go through all 6 of the classes. And we are just very much appreciative of taking the time to be able to do this, because this allows us to be able to be funded. Big thing that we love to do, especially for me as a dietitian, is to take any questions, big or small. I don't think that anything is a dumb question. We love to be able to take on all of these and custom tailor the educations. So the first part of all of these classes is what we take from the previous week and their questions. And so just going right into that type of concept, we'll go into some of the big questions we had from last week, and I just wanted to delve a little bit deeper into those. So the first question that came up was about dairy. We also had one about, is there a magical fruit or vegetable that contains all the potassium, magnesium, and calcium that we would need? As well, there was a question on, is sea salt healthier than regular salt, and what would be the recommendations? As well, if there's any other tips that we have for reducing our blood pressure. So I'll talk about these, and then we'll get into our physical fitness. So when it comes to understanding dairy, dairy is a little bit more complex. There isn't just one type, but there are many different types that we can have in our diet. So starting out, we'll talk a little bit about the raw type of milk, coming straight from the cow, versus organic or regular. If you have an allergy or intolerance, those people that need to have more lactose intolerant, as well, what are the research and what are the benefits of chocolate milk? And then if we're going just off of based on fat content. And overall, I love to just kind of share the information. And from there, you're able to make up your own mind about what may be best for your situation, because it's not just a one cut all fit all for everybody. So the first one is, when it comes to raw milk, this best recommendation is just make sure to use caution. For years, people have drank raw milk and they survived. There wasn't any huge problems. The reason why we pasteurize and we tend to process our milk today is because of foodborne illnesses. We want to standardize it so that it keeps everybody as healthy as possible, and they can put a shelf life on these. So there's a standard when it comes to milk production, and they are able to prevent a lot of these things like diarrhea, fever, abdominal cramping. A lot of these are just not very comfortable, and we don't want to have those for 2 to 5 days or even up to 10 days. So we just want to prevent that as much as possible. So if you have access to a cow, when you are doing it, check your source, make sure that the cow is of good health. If the cow is sick or has any type of problems, a lot of times cows have a little bit of antibiotics that are provided to them to keep them as healthy as possible. As well, making sure that the udders and everything are clean so that you're not getting cross-contamination or any type of bacteria that you don't want inside of the source. As well, check and see what the conditions are like. I was able to enjoy fresh milk when I lived in Logan, Utah for years, and I had access to a farmer who allowed me to come in and see where the cows were getting their milk pumped, and I was able to go straight to his holding tank and able to get fresh milk. I didn't ever get sick from this, but again, with it, just use caution, make sure that you're getting it from the best quality source. When it comes to most people, because most don't have access to dairy farms, is that we have this organic versus regular kind of a question. When it comes to organic, this is specifically from cows that are not treated with antibiotics. If a cow is treated with antibiotics, then it is not labeled. It cannot be labeled as organic. So it has to be more of just kind of a regular type of milk that we consume in our normal diet. Regular milk does contain a little bit, some trace amounts of antibiotics, but it's such a small amount that they haven't ever found that this has a correlating effect into our lifestyles. So it is at a tolerable level. So it's, again, some people have a very big fear of getting that antibiotics passing that barrier, and so, but generally the research hasn't shown there's any side effects to that. This is a big one that I always want to share with anybody. I've had a lot of clients this week who are struggling with cancer, and they wanted to know what is the best type of diet when it comes to like an anti-inflammatory diet. And my biggest thing, especially whenever I meet with somebody as a dietitian for the first time, is find out what you're intolerant to. A lot of people, if you're more of an Asian descent, maybe of more of a Native American descent, can have more of a dairy insensitivity or an intolerance. So if you consume it and you start to get any of these types of symptoms like abdominal cramps, you're starting to get a little bit gassy or bloated, having a little bit more diarrhea, maybe you're struggling with a little bit of indigestion or cramps, those might be great things to be aware of, that you are maybe not tolerating dairy as well into your diet. Even if you love dairy and it is your favorite thing in the world, I had a client that shared that with me. Well, it's sometimes good to be able to take precautions for this. And we make it as easy as possible today. They have gone through and they've been able to break down the enzyme that our small intestines create in the little villi. And this is called lactase. And this is like just one of the brands that has it, the lactate. This is a pill that you can take and it'll provide that enzyme. So it'll break it down in your stomach so that you are able to process the lactose that you're going to consume. So if you're going to have a bowl of ice cream and you want to enjoy it with your grandma, this is one that you can do to be able to help stop those symptoms. As well, they do provide this same enzyme and they'll put it into the milk itself and they'll break down that lactose enzyme into glucose and it'll make it actually a little bit sweeter. So sometimes the lactate milks are a little bit sweeter and they don't have more sugar. They just are broken down into more of a refined sugar. So it's a little bit sweeter than the normal taste. So just something to get used to. But if you don't like dairy milk at all and you've heard a lot of things, there are so many other options. I always recommend trying to get the unsweetened kind that maybe is fortified with some of the vitamins and minerals that you would like. Dairy is a great source of calcium and to keep our bones protected. So making sure that it has a little bit of calcium inside of these, or take a supplement, especially if you are a woman over maybe 40, that would probably be one of the good recommendations. When it comes to chocolate milk, I know that this is like a child's favorite beverage of choice when we're a little bit younger. And I always recommend looking at the research because this may not be the best choice for every type of person, but for our little athletes out there, this is one of the best types of post-recovery shake or beverage that they can get within 30 minutes of working out. So if we work out our muscles, we are using our glycogen storage, our sugar stores in our muscles, and we use them and we wear them out and we break them down, and then they get tired and we have to repair it. So a lot of times people will take a lot of protein drinks right after they work out, and that's great, but the research has shown if you really want to supplement that and get it all into your body appropriately and get that protein to heal, what you need is you need to bind it with 4 to 5 grams or 4 to 5 ratio of simple sugars to 1 ratio of protein. So if you're going to be having, say, 20 grams of protein, you want to have 80 to 100 grams of simple sugars. It sounds kind of abnormal. It sounds like a lot, but even if it was having a glass of chocolate milk and a banana, having that right after a kid has worked out probably is going to be one of the most fantastic things. A lot better than drinking a bunch of soda or anything like that that is a little bit more processed, or even like orange juice. This would probably be a little bit better because it has a lot of good vitamins and minerals as well as calcium. So great for the athletes. If you're trying to lose weight, maybe chocolate milk may not be the best thing to be able to supplement into your diet. As well, the last component of milk and kind of determining what might be best for you is to remember that we are creatures of habit. So if we have always drank whole milk, then sometimes it is recommended if you have more of a cardiovascular risk, maybe you've been diagnosed with hypertension or high blood pressure. One thing that's a good thing to try to do is reduce the amount of fat that's in your dairy content. So, but do this nice and slow, because everything that comes when it comes fat related from an animal is usually going to be a saturated fat or a lot more in saturated fat. So if we can reduce that, you'll still get the same amount of protein, still get the same amount of carbs, and you'll still get all those vitamins, minerals. It's just reducing the amount of fat that you're getting, but do this in a slow amount. So if you try to go from whole milk to non-fat, it's really hard for the mind and for the body. Your sense of taste, you're just not going to like it. And you'll just go back to what you were doing. So try to slowly transition yourself to what would be the most beneficial for your heart. If you're a kid and you just need a lot of extra calories and you're not worried about cardiovascular disease because you're 10 years old, give them whole milk. They're probably going to be just fine. There's not going to be a problem there. And it's a way to get a little bit more nutrients into them as well. When it comes down to the second question that we had from last week was, is there a specific type of fruit or vegetable that has all of the things that we are looking for? Because in the recommendation, we recommended for potassium, one of the best things that you can do is to get fruits and vegetables. And we'll see in a bit, I'll actually transfer over the screen so that you can see what I found when it came to a compilation. As well with magnesium, and I think the big number to think about is around 300, and I marked it on the sheets, but think magnesium, we want to try to get at least 300 milligrams in a serving, and so seeds and nuts tend to be a little bit higher. The 764 milligrams of magnesium, that was in pumpkin seeds, so they had a little bit more. As well, calcium, if we have a glass of milk, like we were talking about earlier, that has about 305 milligrams of it. And so if we're trying to get 2 to 3 servings, that's somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 to 1,000 milligrams of magnesium or calcium into our normal daily diet. So what I'll do is I'll switch over to the new screen, and this will be the spreadsheet. And this will help us to have a greater understanding. So one of the things that anybody can do is you can go online and find a compilation of all the vitamins and minerals in every type of food. And it's amazing the list they have. I've had to actually delete so much of it because it was so big. And so I just highlighted the big ones for when it comes to vegetables that are a little bit higher in certain things. So the first one is calcium. And what has the highest? So there are a few that if you don't drink dairy and you wanted to be able to get it into your diet, dried chives or things that have like a little bit more radishes, seaweed. Some of our herbs and spices are going to be a lot higher in calcium. So just be aware that you can get that, but there's not very many. So unless you're pounding down a lot of chives, it's hard to get that amount. So maybe a supplement may be best. When it comes to potassium, we do see a couple of them that kind of fit 2 or 3 of these categories. But the one, like if you're wanting to do chives, like our class from last week, herbs are always fantastic way to be able to get more nutrients as well as have it as an antioxidant as well as an anti-cancer type of thing. As well, when it comes to the top foods that are going to be great when it comes to potassium, again, this is in our vegetables, so this is what we're looking for. Parsley. And then as well, we can see those chives are still in there, dehydrated carrots, peppers, as well as leeks. So a lot of, again, those herbs and spices are going to be fantastic to making sure that we can get these. But also all of these are so much higher. You can see just in a couple of hundred versus a couple of thousand are fresh herbs and vegetables. And then as well, when we just look at our magnesium, there are a few that have a little bit higher in magnesium. So if you're not a nut fan, you're not a seed fan, if you're eating seaweed, a lot of people I know don't eat a ton of seaweed unless you're having sushi. But that can be a way to be able to get that into our diet as well. Again, it's chives and fresh parsley can be great ways to get a little bit more magnesium. So it sounds like overall, if you were to pick something when it comes to at least vegetables, would be very good, would be getting your fresh herbs, throwing in like what we talked about last class. When it comes to calcium on the fruits side, there is only one that is going to be even comparable to milk. And that's because it is calcified, it's fortified with calcium, and that's in concentrated orange juice. So it is not naturally in oranges or any of the fruits, but there's a little bit in things like rhubarb and goji berries, but really not a lot compared to what is in dairy. So that's where, again, you want to see there's no magical fruit. Some of the vegetables, more herbs, are going to be a little bit higher in these. But there's no magical, like none of the magnesium had anything even close to what nuts and seeds are. But calcium with potassium, they're much, much higher again in the 1800s to 800. There's quite a bit. So persimmons, prunes, peaches, lychees, as well as apricots. A lot of these have a lot higher potassium. So again, looking back at what we had in our slide, is we can see those fruits and vegetables as well as herbs. So I could add herbs on top of here. Those are going to be the highest when it comes to here. So you can get a few from the magnesium, calcium, but again, nuts and seeds are going to be the easiest way to get those, as well as calcium. That is going to be dairy or some type of dairy supplement if you need it. When it comes down to our third question was about sea salt. And the question is it healthier? And so the big thing to remember about salt is the sodium content, because it balances out the amount of fluid that we have in our body. And so we're thinking, okay, salt, sodium, sodium is our heart. So when we're trying to figure out what the sodium content is, how does it compare to things like table salt? So table salt has a little bit of iodine to protect our thyroid gland, but what is like sea salt? Well, sea salt barely has any change. Cooking salt, rock salt, even pink Himalayan salt is relatively the same amount of sodium content. It just very, very small, minuscule amounts different. So there's really not a huge amount, unless you're looking at things that are like celery salt or low sodium salts. Maybe things, if you're going to shift over, maybe switching over to things like Mrs. Dash or other herbs and spices will be a little bit less in salt. But really, when it comes to cardiovascular health, there's not a huge difference between sea salt versus table salt. The only difference is going to be is the flavor preference, as well as if you like a certain type of mineral that might be in the pink Himalayan salt versus the table salt. But remember, if you cut out a lot of those, table salt does have the iodine that we need to be able to protect our thyroid. And the last question from last week, and I loved it, was what are other tips for reducing our blood pressure? This is a fantastic one. So the thing to remember is improving our diet. So looking at the balanced My Plate, we'll talk a little bit more about that later today, is trying to make sure that you're getting a balanced plate. So you're not just eating a bunch of pasta or breads. You're not just only eating dairy or just being a carnivore and eating only meat. You want to have a balance. So you try to eat more fruits and vegetables, less in the processed foods, so less sodium content are always going to be great recommendations. When it comes to relating to today, we have recommendations of 30 minutes of exercise daily. So it's not just, oh, I'm going to pump my heart, I'm going to push really hard for 2 hours once a week. This is a compilation, this is a compiled effect. So if you overstress your heart or stress it on one day, it's harder on your body. But regular exercise, if you work, even if you're only doing 5 minutes today and you do 10 minutes next week and you work your way up to 30 minutes, that is the best thing for helping reduce blood pressure. As well, personal recommendation, alcohol is considered a poison. We will make exceptions of like moderation, but really, if you can just eliminate alcohol from your diet, that'll probably be the best thing to be able to help with reducing blood pressure when it comes to correlation to alcohol consumption. This doesn't matter if it's wine or beer or liquor of any kind. But if you are going to drink, recommend one for serving. So like one for women as a serving size. So make sure, like, depending on how big your glass is, that's going to be one serving size. For men, it's recommended 1 to 2. So again, if you can get the least amount of damage possible, would probably be best. And another one is just in overall general life and how we handle stress, is reducing the amount of stress that we have in our life is going to be so beneficial. So if you are high strung and you're just always having to control everything and you realize that like you can't unwind, figure out ways to be able to de-stress your life, whether that's reading a book, go for a walk, again, getting exercise, right? Or if you're going to turn on an audiobook or listen to music, maybe go on a vacation, whatever it is to be able to help you reduce stress. Those are just a couple of the major 5 things that can help with reducing blood pressure from our questions last time. So now let's go into our lesson for today. The first one is all about incorporating a little bit more fitness and exercise into our families and into our lives today. So today, one of the big goals that I'm going to try to shoot for to be able to help with everybody who's able to participate and listen to this either live or afterwards is going to be able to identify a couple of the things in our areas in our lives to be able to increase our physical activity. So just thinking of ways that we can do this in a safe way. Again, making sure that we're not pushing too hard, too fast and injuring ourselves, because if you go from 0 to 60, but then you hurt yourself, we don't want you to crash. And so we want to make sure that you understand how to do this safely. And we'll have some tips and tricks of how to prepare yourself and do it nice and slow. As well, how to increase our physical activity. So from wherever you were at, and how to try to increase that and get into a little bit healthier style. There are 4 varieties of physical activity we're going to talk about today. And as well, this is a really, really important one, especially being in Nevada. And that's where at least I'm central that. The other people may be watching this from other places, but staying hydrated is so critical for making sure our bodies stay nice and healthy. So those are going to be the big ones that we're going to be talking about today. So one of the first benefits of physical activity is it helps us slow the aging process. And this does this by, if we are exercising and we're moving our body and our muscles, we prevent muscle loss. So if that concept of if we use it, we keep it. If we don't use it, we lose it. So we want to continue to try to preserve our lean muscle mass as much as possible. So increasing our activity can help with that, as well as increasing our strength. So not just preventing deterioration or weakness, but increasing our strength and activity is going to help out so much. The next one is it makes it just easier to be able to do daily life. So like if you have to move a chair when you're at home, or maybe lifting something, like you have a bottle of water and it makes it a little bit easier to lift. Or how about if you're having a hard time being able to open it yourself, strengthening your grip and strengthening your body can make daily activities just a little bit easier for you. As well, how about reaction time? We want to be able to try to stay as independent as possible for as long as possible. And if we are able to exercise, we're training our proprioceptors, the little sensors at the ends of our body, either our feet or our hands. We know where we're at in space. As we train that, we are able to have a better reaction time and move a little bit better. As well, it clears our mind and helps us to be able to think a little bit better. So if we are, say, for example, as a kid wanting to learn how to drive, or as an elderly to be able to continue to drive, this is always a very important thing to be able to keep up exercise because our reaction time will be a little bit faster and it'll train our nerves to be able to go from our brain to our hands and our reactions a little bit faster. And this will just help us to be able to preserve our independence for as long as possible. This one is very, very important, and I can't stress it enough, especially for people that are as they get a little bit older, is having better balance. A lot of times that instability comes in if we're inactive. Our muscles on our lateral rotators and muscles that stabilize our hips are always going to usually decrease quite a bit because we walk and we go forward, but we don't always think about those lateral motions. Very few of us go dancing or go and brush our teeth while dancing or anything like that. So we want to prevent falls as much as possible because in the elderly population, falling is number one when it comes to the major disability for our senior population. Number two is going to be more of dysphagia or swallowing and choking. So we just want to make sure that we prevent them from falling as much as possible. And increasing our physical activity can definitely help with that, as well help with things like increasing, improving our heart and keeping our heart healthy, as well as regulating our blood pressure and preventing strokes. So overall, there's so many great benefits. We've talked about some of those from previous classes, like the grains, the fruits and vegetables, the herbs. So it's amazing. You start with one thing and you pick it. If even if it was just one thing that you want to start improving, your life's going to improve by little increments over and over. But another great thing when it comes to physical activity is our mind. So muscles, wonderful. Strengthening our bones, great. But keeping our mind sharp, preventing things like dementia or Alzheimer's, or just even any type of cognitive decline, if we're always having to challenge ourselves physically, our mind is always having to continue to push itself. And preventing that type of stuff when it comes to age-related illnesses is absolutely so important. And the last one, similar to when we go to our doctors, is if we strengthen our muscles have to attach to something. And so our bones have to become stronger if we're putting a lot more tension on them. So if we increase our physical activity, this strengthens and thickens our bones, preventing osteoporosis, osteopenia, especially in the female populations that are watching this. As we age, after the age of 40, like that is our peak bone mass. and it starts to decline. And especially with hormones, that can decline a lot faster for women. It's not very fair. I apologize. I didn't make the rules. But what we can do is we can prevent that. So physical activity, making sure to get your calcium and your vitamin D, always super important to be able to help us stay as healthy as possible for as long as possible. One of the second benefits, other than slowing the aging process of physical activity, is just overall helping us to feel better in our lives. Because if we start moving more, we have more energy. So if we don't need to use it and we sit at our house all the time, our body kind of goes into reserve mode. So we have the minimal amount of energy needed. But if we start walking and we start playing with our grandkids, we start physically going out and doing things with friends, we increase our energy, our stamina, and we're able to do a lot more. Our lungs have better capacity to be able to go and enjoy the things that we love. As well, it helps us to resist things like fatigue and getting tired when we really don't need to be. As well, not only in the realm of feeling better, but it helps you to be able to cope with things like stress. We are in the middle of a pandemic. During this time when I'm sharing this, we are now into our second year of COVID, and it can be a challenge for anybody. And so stress is just a constant thing in our lives. By increasing our physical activity, that can help us with just being less stressed and being able to enjoy our lives a little bit more. As well, for the mental side of it again, helping to counteract things like anxiety and depression, eating our fruits and vegetables, eating more, and as well balancing, making sure our weight is stable and increasing our physical activity. All of those things can play a role of helping with mental health, especially anxiety and depression. That has definitely been on the rise the last few years. And especially with COVID, a lot of people are struggling, not just the elderly, but even like the working class or even kids. I encounter a lot of kids in my business that struggle with mental health, and so being able to have this is one of those great blessings. And who wouldn't love to be able to sleep a little bit better? So we deplete all of our energy stores from our muscles, and now it needs to restore and recover and heal. Well, if we get an injury or a minor stressor and we've used up all of our energy through the day, one of the great things is we improve our quality of sleep. So being able to sleep better, we recover and we get a better quality night's sleep overall. And this will just help us to be able to feel a lot more rested. And this is just a great blessing I've seen in my own family and friends, that this starts to decrease over a period of time. And a last way of helping you to be able to feel better is it shares time with our family and our friends. Do you love archery? How about dancing? Do you love to be able to go out on the golf course like we see in this picture? And just be able to share that time of connectedness and fellowship can help with all the other aspects of our life as well, because we just feel so much better. And these are just a couple of the things that we recommend, of like just some of the benefits. Why would we want to start increasing our activity? But what happens of the risks if we choose not to? Because I'm not here to tell you, oh, you have to do this, you have to do that, because everybody has their own agency. Everybody has their own choice of what they're going to do. But if we're inactive, there are certain types of health risks, and there are things that can definitely impact us. So when we are going through and trying to increase our physical activity, go to a professional, go to a doctor, and talk to them and say, I want to be able to increase my physical activity. A dietitian just shared this with me, and I want to be able to start to do more. What can I do? And if you're not at a critical stage, maybe if you're a kid or you're in you're earlier in your life, this might be one where you may not have to just always consult with a doctor before you start rock climbing. Just start slow with whatever you're able to do, and make sure that you're not going to be hurting yourself. But what we want to do is start out slow. So if you're used to always sitting in a chair or with a walker, start using that and using it to slowly gradually move up to that 30-minute marker. But you want to try to do that most days. So not just a whole bunch in one day, or have this sporadic Disneyland trip where we're with the grandkids and we've been walking for 20,000 steps. What we want to do is do that slowly throughout the day, and that will help us to be able to get there. Now, when it comes to, okay, well, now we know the benefits, now we know the precautions. Well, what types of exercise can I do? And there are, so we always generally want to think about the endurance exercises or the strength bearing exercises, like going to the gym or going walking or running. But there are four kinds of overall exercises that are great for us in our lives. The first one is endurance, and that's going to be our cardiovascular, as well as strength, balance, and stretching. And we're going to go and share through a couple of these on each one. So as you see in the picture with this young couple that are going and riding their bicycles, we have endurance exercises, and these can be a variety of different things. So in one of the handouts, and Marcy, if you'd like, you're welcome to go ahead and send those out to all of our signed up individuals. Even if they are not here today, you're welcome to email those, because the first one is going to be the benefits of walking. And there's a nice little handout that gives some great endurance recommendations for exercise, like how to increase our walking, our jogging, our biking, our rowing, cycling a little bit more, or even going outside now that the sun is really nice and enjoy a little bit of hiking or swimming. So getting those a little bit more into our lifestyles will help out a ton as well. So I think we have about 7 handouts today. So there's lots of good ones. The next one is how to strengthen our body. And that is in the sheet that is the ins and outs of weight training and the benefits of strength training. And this one is fantastic because I even had a friend of mine who was a physical, like a trainer, and she shared that even though you don't have to go and use heavy weights in the gym to be able to strengthen your body, but it's all about making sure that you do it correctly. And you can do things like this where you're using the bands and you can preserve muscle strength. It may take a little bit longer, but you can preserve it just as effectively and a little bit easier on the joints using things like bands. But learning how to do this correctly, as well as just learning where to get those. And so that on that sheet, it'll have a little bit of things like discounted at stores and different places that you can buy little hand weights or little bands. As well, we do have another sheet for our balance, is we want to make sure that we are able to keep ourselves upright without falling. And so you can do simple things like holding onto a chair and lifting one leg, making sure that we can hold ourselves up. I always like the going side to side motion when I'm brushing my teeth or I'm cooking something. There's also things like activities like yoga are absolutely fantastic that have set types of stretches that will go nice and slow into our lifestyle. In the sheet, we do have another sheet for this balance, and this is called the creating health and maintaining balance and preventing falls. So this one is going to be great for helping us understand how to be able to get a little bit more balance into our lives. And the last one is going to be for stretching. Stretching is so, so important because we don't want to hurt ourselves as we start to increase our physical activity. So not only yoga or classes like that, you can do things like going online and finding these activities that you can easily do stretches for yourself. As well, doing like a mirroring activity or any type of stretching activity is going to be helpful. Make sure to try to do it before and especially after the exercise. So when you're trying to warm up, doing a little bit of stretching, doing it afterwards to help prevent yourself from having any type of injuries. If you don't warm them up and cool them down, sometimes that tight muscle can get a little bit hurt. And as a medical massage therapist myself, I would recommend whatever you exercise that day to try to make sure to stretch that out and get a good balance. Usually 20 to 30 seconds is usually recommended to get a good lasting stretch. One of the last parts of this physical activity wise is the hydration. And I can't stress this one so importantly. And it is hard because as we age, and it is shown in research that as we get to over the age of 60, our salivary glands, we don't get as thirsty as we once did. So a lot of times dehydration is very, very a big risk. So a lot of times when I was doing my internship in a hospital or at the VA, I noticed that a lot of people would have to come in and they were already dehydrated, and we would have to give them saline to be able to kind of give them a little bit more fluids into their life and hydrate them, give them a little bit more sodium, give them a little more water, and get that back to being able to feel better. Because it's getting a little bit warmer outside, I think it was close to, I think it was 95 degrees, at least here in Reno, Nevada. It gets very hot. So make sure to stay hydrated, especially in the summer times, but all throughout the year, staying hydrated is critical. It's good for our skin, good for our muscles. Overall, it's great. If you are starting to maybe think that you're dehydrated, it can cause things like confusion or dizziness, or make it a little bit harder for you to concentrate, or even it can be deadly if you get too dehydrated. So this is just one that you want to just make sure to pay attention to how much you're drinking in a given day. If you tend to have a diet a little bit higher in things that are more diuretics, so like things like tea, coffee, alcohol, any type of things like that, that might be draining out a little bit more water or fluids out of our body and making us a little bit more dehydrated. So having between 4 and 8 ounces of water in maybe before an activity is really important because that can then help us to be able to stay hydrated and keep our muscles lubricated. But then drink that 4 to 8 ounces after an exercise because you're now moving all of those and you're going to be ready to rehydrate. But overall, again, minimal, maybe 8 glasses of water a day, 64 ounces to be able to help stay hydrated. As you get more active, you may need to increase that a little bit more before and after those exercises. But again, it's really hard as we age, we get less aware of how thirsty we might be. And so this can be just a precaution as well. Certain medications that we take over our lifestyle can change our perception of how thirsty we are. And so that can be something to be able to watch out for as well. Now, I know a lot of times there's the, okay, don't drink as much tea, coffee, and alcohol, but there's also, okay, well, don't just switch over and drink a bunch of soda either. We want to try to stay as well hydrated. And I always think of it as if I wanted to wash my clothes, what would be the best thing to wash my clothes in? And it's not necessarily like we're going into the detergents, but making sure we have that nice, clean, good water that can help flush us out. And we do have a handout as well, and this is one of the last ones, is creating health with water, water everywhere for seniors as well as the family. And so this is going to be a great little resource because it's going to give kind of tips and tricks of how to stay a little bit better hydrated. You can do things like in this, you can add a little bit of cucumbers and lemons to add a little bit of flavor. Sometimes adding a little bit of fruit or herbs like mint can be really tasty. But if you don't want to just drink, there's also things like soups, jellos, or even just eating more fruits and vegetables is a great way to be able to stay a little bit more hydrated in our diets today. So again, just to review today's first lesson on the fitness fun, we're just getting this a little bit more into our families. Physical activity, increasing it can help reduce our aging process, keep us healthier for a longer period of time. It helps us feel better. So our mental status, as well as just connecting with the people around us and helping us enjoy and get the most out of our lives. Making sure to start nice and slow and safe so that you're not hurting yourself, making sure that to remember there are 4 different kinds of physical activity, making sure to start and end with a little bit of a stretch. But remember, there's balancing, there's strength training, but there's also the endurance and strengthening our heart and our lungs are all critical things that are going to be super important. But the final thing is making sure to stay hydrated. Get that, especially with the summer out right now. Try to stay as well hydrated as possible to be able to prevent any type of cramping, imbalances, or problems that can come from dehydration. And so as we go in, we are going to go ahead and take a just a little 5-minute intermission to be able to get a little bit of water and take a break. For those who are here or at home when you're watching this later, I'd recommend going grab some kind of something that has a nutrition label or some kind of nutrition or supplement label and look at it. We will go ahead and have that as a little activity after the intermission. So we will come back um, and we'll take it maybe a little bit shorter because it's just us two for today. And we'll come back in about 3 minutes. All righty, let's come back from our break and we will go ahead and start in our second section of how to be able to understand a little bit better when it comes to dietary supplements. And this is one that is super important because I have seen so many people that will come to me and they'll bring an entire bag. And it seems like doctors today love to give lots of medications and supplements and different things. And so some people I've met don't take anything. Some people take a lot of supplements and no medications. Some people just have a bunch of everything. So I love this section because it helps us to be able to understand and evaluate what is necessary versus not. And did you know that there's a lot of people that are on a fixed income or a limited income that are recommended and are taking unregulated or oftenly medically unsubstantiated, so they are not proven to be helpful as dietary supplements. So they're just wasting their money if it's not necessary. As well, I have a lot of questions from me as a dietitian. Like a lot of people come to me and ask questions about what supplements are they necessary, how to be able to have them more effectively in our diets. And so my hope is after today, I can kind of share and impart some shared knowledge about how to know if it's a credible source, if it's going to be effective, if the labeling is correct, as well as regulations and some of the pros and cons of some of the dietary supplements. But of course, this is a huge market. There's a lot of money, a lot of stuff into it. So just be careful. But after this class, my hope is that you will be able to define what is a dietary supplement, as well, increasing your understanding of what do I need to be looking for when it comes to it, and understanding what a daily value is in that supplement. Usually, those are on the right hand side of the column. As well, understanding the safety concerns as well as what is in dietary supplements that may be concerning, and as well understanding what is the best source, because so many times people are like, oh, I've heard this multi-level marketing, I've heard this thing on my computer, I got an email for finding out, like I even earlier this week I got an email saying like obesity reduction cure, here's the supplement for it, or here's the cancer reduction. So just be careful because there's a lot of people that will try to get you to buy and sell and like get you to either buy things or sell them to your neighbors and your friends. So just be careful because there's a lot of people that try to prey on people that just don't know. So first question is, what is a dietary supplement? How is that defined? And so a dietary supplement was defined back in 1994 from Congress, and it was made into a law. And it said that is anything taken by the mouth that has some type of dietary ingredient. And so this is a broad range of things. This could be vitamins, it can be minerals, it can be herbs or botanical types of plant-based things. So that means any type of plant that is going to be more of a therapeutic property, as well amino acids. So when we get our proteins and we break them down, sometimes people will consume amino acids like branched chain amino acids, as well as enzymes. So like if we are, maybe our pancreas isn't being working properly and we have to take pancreatic enzymes, or we talked about earlier with the lactose intolerance, we have to take lactase. Well, that is an enzyme. As well, glandulars. So what is a glandular? Well, if you have thyroid issue, you usually are getting some kind of glandular, or this is usually made from the gland of another animal, and we're getting it produced for us so that we can stay alive and stay as healthy as possible. So now we understand what is or how they define what a dietary supplement is. um, how do they come? How do we receive those into our body? And you can see, I think everybody who's lived on life for at least a few years has probably seen a handful of medications and pills, but they don't just come in pill form. They can come in tablets and gels. They can come in liquid format. I've seen little things that are going to be more probiotic liquids, as well as powders. But big thing to remember, no matter how good a supplement is, it is not supposed to be a meal replacement. It is not supposed to take place of regular food. Food is supposed to be the medicine. Supplements can help sustain somebody, but are not always necessary if we're getting a good balanced meal. So we want to look at the back label. So if you have your little food item or anything that you may have grabbed from your pantry or your medicine cabinet, look at the back here. and just to see, because if it is a food, it should say nutrition facts. Interesting. So if I look at a supplement, it'll say supplement facts. So make sure that you're reading the top thing, as well as, of course, always look at the serving size because sometimes there's a lot of servings or there's less in a certain container. But we must be able to read that it is a dietary label or some type of supplement. So it is a supplement facts. That's what we're going to be looking at a little bit more closely today. As well, the daily values, and this is usually on the right-hand side of the column, you'll see daily values, and they'll give you percentages or little asterisks. These are very, very important to look at because this is not based off of the amount of calories that a person needs. So like we look at our calories and that's based off of a 2000 calorie diet generally on there. But for a general person to be able to be as healthy as possible, we need a certain amount of vitamins and minerals to be able to stay healthy. And this is if I have you on my table and I'm a dietitian and you are in a comatose state, I have to make sure to provide 100% of these to be able to make sure that your body doesn't break down or have any kind of organ failure or any kind of problem. And so just remember that a daily value is only created for a nutrient, such as a vitamin or mineral, when there is an established need for this health. And the amount of it has been set by a specific organization that is known to be able to make sure and regulate these as a safety. And this is called the National Institute of Health. I always think of it as NIH. The National Institute of Health is there as an expert panel that reviews and looks at all the most current research and finds out exactly how much do we need of a certain type of vitamin or mineral that is necessary for our body's health. This is important because a lot of times we look over and we can see some of these supplements will have far more than what we really need. But that's because sometimes our bodies don't absorb things as well as others. So sometimes they will have a little bit more, but other times it's almost like they're not really regulated. So you have to be very careful. So the reason why it says 100% is because that is what they have found research based. We need 100% in our diet to get to that value. So if we look at this vitamin D supplement, vitamin D is very important for people that maybe don't go outside in the sun or don't absorb sunlight very well. It's needed for to make sure our bones stay strong. Well, this supplement itself has 2 tablets and it's a 500% of what we need. So 5 times the daily amount a normal person would need. So the question is, do we need that or is it going to make us sick? Do we need to overconsume over 100% of vitamins to be able to make sure? If you're going to be consuming on a regular basis over 100%, usually the recommendation is go talk to your doctor. Make sure that that is something that you absolutely necessarily need to do and consume on a regular basis because there are certain vitamins and minerals, and D is one of them. I always think of it as ADEK, A, D, E, and K, and those are fat soluble vitamins. Those get stored in our liver. The liver is our big filter. And that is one that, like, if we drink alcohol, if we have poisons, maybe we have a lot of smoke in the area and there's fires, that what filters out all those toxins is our liver. So if we're taking excess amounts of vitamins, even if it's something as good as what we've been told, you want to make sure to be careful on how much we're over consuming because at least A, D, E, and K, so vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K are all going to be fat soluble. So they will be stored in our body. Everything else, like the B vitamins, vitamin C, we consume to a certain amount. And after we get to a level that our body can absorb, we pee it out. So it becomes more of expensive urine. But what you want to do is just figure out, okay, remember that there is an established line. And underneath these black lines, it will show specifically how much percentage we need. If there is not an established daily amount, it has that little asterisk right underneath it. So we see that thing like glucosamine, hydrochloride, there's no set amount of that to be able to be officially needed in our diet. So they'll have a little asterisk by it saying that this isn't necessarily recommended or needed from it. So one thing that I always recommend when we go into what is the FDA recommended is look at your box because you can see things and they will say the world to you and they will be able to claim certain things. So you just want to be careful because they will sometimes claim things that are not substantiated. And so first look at the label and read it In this particular one, it supports digestive and immune health, as well as promotes vaginal and urinary health. Sounds like a great supplement. Probiotics, if people come to me and ask me about it, I usually recommend at least a couple of strains. This one has 10, has 25 billion live cultures in a capsule. Overall, it looks like an amazing supplement. But remember to look at the diet types of claims and remember what you're reading. And if the label cannot claim or to treat or to cure any type of disease, only to be connected or substantiated by the product if it has or if there's some type of risk when it comes to the FDA who regulates supplements. But most of the time they are not regulated. So we have to be very careful. And so if you see these little asterisk right at the back side of those claims, and then we go to the very bottom, we can see that it says that the statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. So we can throw out and we can have a ton of different claims, but they usually have to say if they have not been officially researched out. So we have to be very careful on what we're looking at and what we're getting, because sometimes those boxes will be very fancy and they'll try to sell you on it. And there are companies that are going through and making sure that these are of quality. And we'll talk a little bit about those later and how to find those. But just be aware that sometimes they will make claims and they're not always proven correct. So we have to be very, very careful because similar to this little guy, there's a lot of money in it. If we can get people that are constantly buying these, I have seen even some of the most reputable doctors and specialists who a salesman will come in, they'll wine and dine them, they'll show them all these amazing things. They'll say that half of your clients are on these supplements already at home. You can compile it and put it into one pill, and they will be able to save money in the long run, and you can provide this as a help for them. But then the benefit is they now get a little bit of a kickback because they're selling you on something that's not provided by the insurance. And so there's an ulterior motive. Sometimes they're trying to get you to buy things that maybe you don't need, but they're getting money out of it. So I always am very leery and just be careful because the pharmaceutical companies tend to get in with even the most credible doctors or most credible sources to be able to make money from you. And so be very careful because a lot of those claims are not substantiated and not evaluated yet by the FDA, and they can just put them out on the market and sell them, and capitalism just keeps them going, but they're not necessarily the most beneficial. So none of them, if they are not specifically there to be able to diagnose, treat, or cure, or prevent any kind of disease, it'll have that little marker on the bottom and the asterisks on the side. So just make sure to read those as well as possible. And again, these supplements can get very costly over time, so just be careful. So let's look at just kind of an example, and this might be one that you may be able to recognize somebody in your own life, or maybe yourself, that we are in this situation, or somebody we know will be. And so let's just kind of throw into, let's call his name Bob, and he is retired and he now lives alone. So he just was able to retire. But the challenge is because he's not always hungry and he doesn't have his wife telling him to make sure to eat breakfast and all that, he tends to skip a couple of meals because he's just a little tired. Maybe he sleeps a little bit more often and he's just not as hungry. The question is, do you think the supplements would be a benefit to him to be able to help him out, to be able to maybe give him more energy, to be able to maybe improve his quality of health? And that is going to be the question that we want to start thinking about. Okay, we have a single person, retired, skipping meals. Is this going to be some type of benefit? And I want you to start thinking about for yourself. And I'm going to share a couple of the times when maybe a multivitamin with minerals may be a great thing because it can give you 100% of what you need in your daily diet. So this is specifically helpful when it comes to certain people that have maybe chronic health conditions. Chronic health conditions are a great one, specifically like with things like cancer or heart disease or diabetes. Having some type of dietary supplement can help out, especially multivitamins are going to be a great source. As well, things like skipping meals or food groups. If you are just one that you just are lactose intolerant, you don't eat it at all, maybe you have celiac disease and you skip out and you just cut out all grains all out of your diet. If you're skipping large groups of food groups or skipping meals throughout your day, multivitamins might be a good recommendation. As well, I think we talked about it a little bit earlier. You already know my feelings on alcohol, but if you smoke or drink alcohol excessively, this can leach out some of those multivitamins out of you. So you want to be very, very careful. If you are smoking, don't take a lot of excess vitamin C. That can be a contraindication, and that can actually cause more cancer. So you just want to be careful with vitamin C if you're a smoker. But a multivitamin to be able to get everything of your daily amount would be good. Thing like Airborne or a lot of extra oranges or orange juice, maybe not so good for people that are smokers, but it would be good for things like somebody who is an alcoholic or drinking it excessively. As well, if you are on any kind of specialized type of diet, so like if you're a vegetarian, maybe you are changing up and you've heard about this fad diet like low carb or keto diet or Atkins. If you're starting to skip certain types or you're having a specialized type of diet, a multivitamin would be a wonderful recommendation, even because your food is now not consistent, it's not balanced. So you want to make sure you can get as much nutrients as possible. But before you start changing anything up, I always recommend being completely honest with not only your doctor, but who is the medical professional that knows nutrition? That's dietitians. I've had people come in and I've even had to go through and talk about supplements with my own mom or my own family members. And I have seen it where they take a handful of supplements. They may not be taking a ton of pills, maybe one or two, but they have a handful of supplements. That can be really hard on the body, especially because you really are not going to overdose when it comes to vitamins if you're eating it from fruits and vegetables from your balanced diet. You're not going to overdo it on calcium when you're getting it from dairy because there's other things that are balanced in there. But supplements can definitely, you can easily overdo those, or just you're paying for things that you don't really need. And so if you don't trust the doctor, maybe recommend going and talking to a dietitian, just making sure, because I have had a client come in and they've shown me an entire briefcase of supplements they're taking. And I kind of narrowed it down to a multivitamin and maybe a fish oil just to be able to help balance them out. And so sometimes we can just simplify that. If you're getting over 100%, sometimes it's just not necessary. And the ADEK, ADENK, are things that you want to make sure not to get overdoing in our diets because those can sometimes be a little bit more harmful. But there are certain conditions. So it's like you have had surgery and you have a bowel resection and you are not absorbing things as well. Maybe you got into a fight, got into a car accident, maybe somebody stabbed you with a knife or something, or you got shot. I've had a few clients like that, and your body doesn't absorb as well. Or maybe as you age, if we're over the age of 60, it is very, very important to be able to take multivitamins if you need it, because certain vitamins like B12, uh, B6, vitamin D, as well as calcium, we have a higher need for those because our body doesn't absorb it as well. And in general studies, they have found things like iron, zinc, and especially calcium are lower in seniors' diets. So as we start to eat less, we may not be getting all the nutrients that we need. So having some supplements can definitely help us out. And there are ways to be able to get this into our diet. We'll talk a little bit about that as well through a little bit of supplements. But again, don't rely on supplements, protein powders, beverages. Make sure that we're trying to get the best diet possible, getting that balance from the food groups, getting all the recommendations that they have are always going to be the best thing. A multivitamin won't hurt, but making sure to try not to skip a meal. So, like our guy, like Bob, our retired single guy, skipping meals, that would probably be a really good situation for him to have a multivitamin, but to try to regulate eating a little bit more balanced meals into his diet. And remember, balanced, the healthy is not necessarily, oh, just stay away from this, stay away from that. Don't demonize foods, but there's certain foods you want to eat more and less of. Trying to balance your plate and having half of it is fruits and vegetables. The other quarters are going to be grain and protein, and having dairy a couple of times in the day are always great recommendations. But there's no supplement that's going to oversee this. So if they are trying to sell you on, oh, our fruits and vegetables don't have enough, so you have to take this supplement, they're usually trying to sell you on something. So just be very careful. The USDA recommends the plate method because it gives you all the vitamins and minerals that you need and usually is recommended from all dietitians as well as doctors. So this is just a good, healthy way to be able to kind of try to stay balanced as well as possible. But there are ways for maybe our gentleman Joe who's not as hungry. So what do we do if we're not as hungry? Well, there are certain things like the Ensure or the protein shakes or the protein bars that can give us a little bit more vitamins and minerals to be able to help us get enough calories into our diet. But just remember, for somebody who's active, like we learned about in the first section, as well as people who are having a balanced meal, especially seniors, this isn't always necessary. And if anything, this can start to cause a little extra calories in our diet, and it can give us some more extra weight gain. We increase our weight, we increase our blood pressure, our heart, cancer. There could be other repercutting factors. So no matter how healthy and great these snacks or these supplements look, if we're eating too much, this can start to affect us in a negative way. So just be aware of that. You're trying not to overdo the 100% of that daily value in your day. All right, so just to take a quick little kind of a breather, look at the item that you may have chosen. So to review something that we talked about a little bit earlier, does it say nutrition facts or does it say a dietary supplement? We want to check and see what kind is this as well. Is there a daily vitamin, like a daily value for each of the supplements and items in this list? Are there any of them that don't have it and they just have little asterisks? So it's like a special supplement that is not necessarily needed, but it's good for us, right? As well as there any kind of crazy health claims, if we flip it over, that haven't been evaluated by the FDA? Are they promising us something that maybe they cannot provide? So just be aware, again, there are a ton of different things when it comes to food supplements or nutrition supplements. Make sure to look at it. If it says it's a supplement fact, okay, now we know that we're looking at a supplement. Are any of these values over 100? If we're taking things like vitamin D because the doctor told us to, start taking it, having it as a balance, introduce that into our diet. And then I'd recommend checking your blood levels again and see when you look at your lab values, are you in a good level? Are you too high or are you too low? Because maybe the 500% is